Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many familiar names. And of course, if you're new to PMI or to our webinars, it's good to have you with us today. For those of you who just connected in the last couple of minutes, please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar to pose any questions that you have as we go through the session today. I'm Susanna Clark, and I'm going to be manning the Q&A, so I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. There will also be time for further questions at the end of this webinar, and after today's webinar, because it's being recorded, we will be sharing that with you. Now I'd like to hand over to Des Kelly. Thank you, Des.
Thank you very much, Sue. Welcome to everybody. Good day to you wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this webinar on the role of the steering teams in the new normal. We are all faced with extraordinary times at this present moment in time, and what we'll be covering today is the context for the steering team as we approach the new normal, the role of the steering team. We have 4 rules for the steering team to abide by, and I shall explain what those 4 rules mean and how you can understand them, and then just briefly touching on what the steering team meeting will be about. Now, the objective of today's session is to create intrigue and interest for you, not to educate. There's far too much detail in this subject matter to go through a full training session. So what I hope to do is to share some of my learning from over the last 4 decades whilst I've been dealing with steering teams and organisations as they've tried to improve. And if at all possible, just to place a light into areas that might be helpful as your organisation crosses the threshold into whatever this new normal will be. So previously in this series, if you've been engaged with us over the last 12 weeks or so, there are a number of previous webinars which are related to this. If you wish to, you can go to our website and pick them up on the PMI Knowledge Hub. You'll be able to see them there. Just a quick recast over where we went to in some of those previous sessions. We looked at the roles of a leader, and one of the things that I stressed was that we need to understand the expectations, the needs and expectations of the customer, and design a system that will deliver this. As senior leaders, we need to continually monitor the performance of the system and sponsor projects that will change or improve that system in line with the changing customer needs and expectations. And it's almost inconceivable to suggest that there isn't a significant, even seismic shift in the changing needs of customers and their expectations. And as a result, possibly our systems need to change quite dramatically in alignment with it. And then the third role of a leader is to manage the day-to-day operations of that system to obtain the best balance of efficiency, effectiveness, and flexibility. For those that joined us on our previous webinars, you'll be familiar with this graphic. It's the one I use. It gives us a picture that allows us to understand what are those roles. On the right-hand side, lead the system, transform the system in light of those changing customer needs. Sponsor projects when the system needs to be improved. And on the left-hand side, manage the day-to-day processes. So let's have a look at something to consider. When we looked at our system leadership roles a couple of weeks back, that's our system map, and we need to be able to focus on the customer. The customer is central to our full thinking. So what will our customer state of mind be in this new normal? What will they now expect? What will they want? And what will delight them? And the point of reflection here is, will our system deliver those things? And why is it important? Why might that be important? And it's really this, is because offering what you've always offered in ways that you've always offered them to a customer who now has different values is potentially the short route to your organization being irrelevant. The customer has to be central to your thinking in all of this. Now, the new normal also means that we must understand in the same way, not only our customers, but if we look up in the top right-hand corner of that graphic, the world in which our business operates, it will have changed. It changes slowly over time anyway, and we need to be aware of that. But where we have something as significant as the environment we're living in today, there is a risk that it's changed it very significantly. Do we know how it has changed? The world of our suppliers will have changed too. They'll have changed very, very significantly. So will they be there? Will they be operating and offering the same things? Are they going through the same things you are today? And are they thinking of changing how they're going to operate? And finally, in this little graphic, is that the world of everyone working in our systems, everybody in our business, their world will have changed. How will it have changed? What impact does it have on the system? So the final thing in this is that the world we live in today is very different from even 6 months ago. The things that were the norm in the past are very likely to be different today. So some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves are, how will we know what is different? And once we've established that, what path will you choose to follow in response to this difference? And then the very critical question, and this is the one that sits at the door of the steering team, is who will navigate this path to ensure your organization responds to the new normal in a coherent and proactive manner. So before we start, I'm going to set the context for the steering team. So many of you will have definitions of what a steering team is, or a steering committee, sometimes known as. Some are related very specifically to a group that are set in place to govern a particular project, a very narrow operational definition. Others are in place to govern a program of activities. But for this particular context, as we're responding to the changes to the new normal, the definition I should be using for this webinar is for the group who will be governing the business transformation, transforming the business so that it can respond to the new normal. There is a common denominator amongst all of these, and that is that change must have direction and it must have momentum. And one of the key roles of a steering team is to ensure that that change has the right direction and has the appropriate amount of momentum. So a way of looking at that then in a graphical sense is this, is that if you look along the bottom, we could have sub steering teams, which could be set up by the executive steering team. And here's an example of some that I'm dealing with today. Reduce warranty, for example, improve the supply chain, improve or reduce rework in production. But the one I'm going to focus on is this top one, the executive steering team, the one that is going to be looking after the transformation of the business system. Again, the common denominator between them all is that change or transformation must have direction and must have momentum. Otherwise, it fizzles out and has no value. So let's give you the definition of the role of a steering team then. The steering team is a group of senior leaders who have been designated both the responsibility and the authority to change the business system so that it can better serve customers both now and in the future, in order for that system to deliver what it is the customer wants sustainably. So if that's the role of the steering team, let's have a look at the 4 rules for steering teams. And I shall touch on and talk on these. I'm going to give you the list of them initially, and then I'm going to talk through them each. So the 4 rules are them. Rule 1, the steering team that's leading a transformation into the new normal must understand how the business works as a system itself and have a clear strategy that will respond to the world in which that system operates. All organizations today are having to stop and take stock of what are the things we're doing, where are our customers, where are our suppliers, what's the environment that we're in. And they have to now create a strategy that will respond to that world to make sure that you are in a healthy place for the new normal. The second rule for the steering team is they must understand the scientific study method that allows them to develop and challenge theories about how they should respond to point 1 above. It's absolutely imperative, absolutely clear that the key role for the steering team is to ensure that they are steering your organization to this new destination using facts. The third is that there will need to be some form of system or process of improvement that the steering team can apply that will permit them to prioritize and control any of the improvement initiatives that they start off. And then finally, in the 4 rules is that all actions must be subject to rigorous and routine analysis of their impact. If the actions you are taking are not having the desired impact, we will need to have another approach. So let's explore these in a little bit more detail then. So let's first start with rule 1. Rule 1. The steering team must understand how the business works as a system and have a clear strategy that responds to the world in which that system operates. So let's first explore what is a strategy. So a strategy really is about making deliberate choices on what we are going to do, but probably, and more importantly, will be what we are not going to do. Now, Alfred Chandler, as you can see on the screen, his definition of a strategy is the determination of the basic long-term goals of an enterprise and the adoption of a course of action and the allocation of resources necessary to carry out those goals. There are 3 phases to the creation and deployment of a strategy. The first of them is strategic analysis. So understanding the world in which we're operating. I'm going to explain the dimensions of that in a moment. Then strategic choices. Remember I said it's the things that we are going to do, and more importantly, possibly the things that we're not going to do. And then having made our mind up and we've got our strategic choices, it's implementing that into the organization so everybody is aligned. Now, the steering team that is leading any transformation must have a very clear line of sight of this. So here is our business as a system. This, as we've explained before in previous webinars. We have our customer who's central to our thoughts. That customer wants certain things in a particular way to satisfy certain requirements and certain obligations. We have a core process that will deliver that. They're subject to inputs and then the supplies to them. Below that, we have the enabling and support processes. Up at the top, we have the leadership processes. Leadership is a process as well. And the strategic processes that we talk about, strategic analysis, strategic choice, strategic implementation, or strategy implementation, sorry, are contained within the leadership and alignment area in the top right-hand corner of our graphic. So let's have a look at some of the processes and some of the mechanisms that the leadership team, the steering team, really need to be investigating as they progress. So this is studying the world in which our business operates. All our businesses operate and interact within a world in which we exist. This world can simply be defined with 2 operating levels, 2 operating environments. There's the environment that we can influence directly and the environment that can influence us. This is a 2-way interaction. We refer to this as the primary environment. So, for example, our customers can influence what we do. Our competitors can influence what we do. The technology can influence what we can do. We can influence the technology by being inventive. So the primary environment is that 2-way environment where we can influence it and it can influence us. There's then the other environment, which is the macro environment. We refer to it as the macro environment. So this is the environment which we cannot influence, but it will strongly influence us. We're living in a time where the macro environment is probably having one of the most profound effects on businesses around the world. We're living through an environment of COVID-19. There's nothing you can do that will influence that. However, it's having a major influence on you. There are some tools about and some processes you can use to study those things. So for those of you that are interested in strategy, for the primary environment, we would use something like the Porter's model. For the macro environment, we might use something like the pestle environment. Now, both of those tools and techniques will allow us to start to explore and to experience and to see some of the things that are going on in the primary and macro environment. But there's a big risk to those particular tools, and it's this. The biggest risk to strategy is where the opinion we create from the use of those tools and from the application of those tools is that the opinion will override the facts. This is something that Marcus Aurelius said. Now, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor between 161 and 180 AD, and was one of the members of the Stoic school of philosophy. And he said this: everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Now stop and just think about that for one moment. How many times have you seen strategy or direction being given based on a leader's strong opinion? Remember, opinion is not fact. It is an opinion. Everything we see is perspective, not truth. There's another well-renowned philosopher, Ricky Gervais, who actually said this: opinions don't affect facts, but facts should affect opinions. And they do, if you're being rational. So the thing here is to look, when we are actually transforming our organizations, look to explore the facts. That's what's going to be really important. Now, the remedy for this is that the system that we have needs very good listening processes and very good analytical processes. And we're going to explore that a little bit more as we progress through this webinar. Rule 2 then. Rule 2 is the steering team must understand scientific study methods that allows them to develop and challenge theories about how they will respond to this changing world. It's an absolute key role of the steering team to ensure that they are steering using facts, not opinion. Steering using facts. If you joined us last week, we presented this model. This is the Nolan and Provost model. It's one I've used now for many, many years and is quite profound when you start to look at it. So the steering team will be really interested in those top two questions. The question 1, what are we trying to accomplish? And question 2, how will we know that any change is an improvement? We need the steering team to study the environment and generate data that will allow them to truly understand these things. And we allow then the sponsor and project team to determine how they will respond. One of the models you see there is this Plan, Do, Study, Act. Now, I want to take a few moments just to actually discuss Plan, Do, Study, Act. Now, this is the scientific model. It's a scientific model of learning. If you wish to go and explore, there are about 8 or 9 different models of learning. But this is the one for scientific learning. It's also the one which I see used most incorrectly, most frequently. People are using Plan, Do, Study, Act in the wrong way. We start here with Plan, Do, Study, Act. You've got to start with study, because if you don't understand the environment or the circumstances you're in, you can't possibly create a plan to move away from it. So we must start with study. The study is the zeroing element of Plan, Do, Study, Act. We can then move to plan, to undertake a series of actions that will generate a change. The study gives us the ability to develop a theory about what we can do. The plan is the thing that allows us to enact the change. We then do, the do is undertaking some small trials or some tests to see what the impact of our plan had. And from that, we can do the study. When we study again, we'll be then able to say, well, was our theory correct? We did this, did it make a change? Did it make a change? And in our act, we can either adopt the change that we've planned, we can amend it, or if by any chance it's wrong, we can abandon it. So the couple of things about PDSA, which is from my experience over the last 30 odd years or so, is PDSA is not about reviewing what we have done. It's not about reviewing what we have done against what we said we would do. PDSA is also not about confirming we were right. PDSA, and this is the profound difference about this model, PDSA is about how we challenge our theories by observing evidence that might show where we might have been wrong. Now, when we are developing a strategy to move away into a new place, we need to make sure our theories are based on facts, and we use Plan, Do, Study, Act to enable us to be more right more frequently. So PDSA is about studying the environment your business system operates in. It's about studying the environment your business operates in. And it allows you to develop, test, and if you can, disprove theories about the course of action you are likely to take. Remember, opinion and perspective are not, in this circumstance, fact. We use Plan, Do, Study, Act to help us get closer to the facts. And this is vitally critical for any steering team. Just a quick word on some of the perceptions around Plan, Do, Study, Act. I've heard over the years many people say, oh, we don't use Plan, Do, Study, Act because it's way too slow, way too slow. Plan, Do, Study, Act can be done in a matter of minutes, or it can be done over a matter of months. It depends on the subject in which you're dealing. Because PDSA is first and foremost a way of thinking. We apply this thinking to any process that we are following. Take, for example, we're developing a vaccine, apt for this time. The principle around developing a vaccine is control, safety, and efficacy. So the study elements of it will be studying what is this virus? What are its characteristics? That will allow the scientists to develop theories about how they might control that virus, how they might attack it. Now they'll put a plan in place to test that theory. They'll study in a laboratory, was our theory correct? They'll then study and say, was our theory correct? Yes or no? They'll be looking for disconfirming evidence, and they will then say, yes, this theory worked. They can adopt it. No, this theory didn't work. They can abandon it. Or, yes, this theory was correct, but not quite correct enough, so they can amend it. In an IT project, we use Plan, Do, Study, Act as well as part of our agile response. What are we trying to accomplish? Put a plan in place, test it, study the result, and move forward. In an IT project, we use it to ensure progression. The other thing about PDSA is ongoing learning, and particularly where we're looking at a steering team that is evolving, is that we've got this Plan, Do, Study, Act that is in line with the development of our strategy that the steering team are going to be delivering. And every year we refine our strategy through Plan, Do, Study, Act, and it moves on each year. The key messages then from that are, the steering team must continually observe the world in which our system operates, as it will be continually changing. We've got a seismic change that's faced us at this moment in time, but it needs to be ongoing. PDSA is the model that we'll use at all levels of the business to challenge and develop theories about how we can change, how we can move towards a new and better place. It's particularly critical for the steering team, as they will be directing the use and the consumption of valuable and very limited resource. In this context, remember, opinion is not fact. Perspective is not fact. We can only get closer to the fact by correctly analysing the data we have. It's a key role of the steering team to ensure that they are steering using facts, not opinion. My experience is, unfortunately, many organisations, leaders, develop very strong opinions about things, which are often not supported by the facts. And we really need to be very careful about that. One final aspect of a key message, this goes back a large number of years, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, he said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And I think that was profound back in the 1980s when he first said that. But I will say, I'm going to ask his permission if I could amend that in the light of 30 years experience to say this. Without correctly analysed data, you are just another person with an opinion. And for those of you that are improvement consultants or improvement experts, in this context, how will your organization be able to determine whether something is an assignable cause or a common cause? Because that will determine how you approach the resolution to it. So that's about getting the data, analyzing the data that will give you the insight to develop theories about how our system should change. But if our system should change, there then needs to be a system of improvement that will give that steering team the ability to prioritize and control the improvement initiatives. So let's remember then, what is the role of the steering team? The steering team is a group of senior leaders who have been designated with the responsibility and the authority to change the business system so that it can better serve the customers both now and in the future. in order to deliver sustainability. It might be that we take a slightly narrow view of it. They are the people who are designated with the responsibility and authority to change the business system that will save our business in the short term as we return to the new normal. The steering team is faced with, the column on the right-hand side is leading the transformation. They are going to have studied the world in which their system operates in, identify the priorities it needs to go, and then sponsor the projects that are going to maintain, that are going to bring the business back together. So let's look at a system of improvement, or at least some questions that we might be asking ourselves as we develop this system of improvement. If we take the middle strand first, the first question is absolutely paramount. Where are we now? If you do not know where you are now, how can you possibly plan a journey away to a new destination? So we really need to be clear about where are we now. Then with clear reflection, where do we want to be? Where does this organization want to be? When this new normal starts to become routine, where do we want to be? And as a result of that, we've now got a gap between where we are now and where we want to be. So what are the focus areas? Where are we going to have to focus? There are some other questions on there which you can read for yourself, but I'm not going to explore them overly deeply. We in PMI have quite a detailed model that we use when we're diagnosing the health of a system and prognosing what could be the remedies or improvements you could make. All organizations will need to have a way of understanding where they are now and then responding to that and changing. It's an improvement system. In its simplistic form, it will look something like this. On the right hand side, you can see our senior leadership team. This is the steering team. They'll be made up of system owners, process owners, project sponsors, and they are the people who have got the designated authority to change that system. They're going to have to interrelate with our people on the left hand side, people who are operating the processes, because the system is only a system, a collection of processes that work together for the main aim. So the process managers and the process operators will need to be engaged in this transformation. You might, as you see down in the bottom corner, have some project leaders, some green belts, some black belts, who will be leading those projects. And if you were with us last week, you'll remember when we talked about the role of the project sponsor and the project lead. They have to work collectively with the project sponsor to make sure that the strategy that the leadership team have developed is being deployed and is being carried out. You may need to, as you see in the center, have someone who's going to manage the program, some improvement experts, some trainers and facilitators. But looking at the orange triangle at the top, the leadership team are providing direction, they're providing design and providing resources. On the left-hand side, the process managers and operators are maintaining performance and continually improving, whilst we're actually looking at moving into this new norm. The experts or the program manager will provide guidance and support to help implement the strategic change. So we'll look now at Rule 4. Rule 4. All actions must be subject to rigorous and routine analysis of impact. Remember, we started with this model. What are we trying to accomplish? That's the first question. The second question, how will we know that any change is an improvement? There's a big issue here for me in many organizations is we often lose sight of those the three questions. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that any change is an improvement? Because it's the steering team that have to sponsor these and determine them. So what are we trying to accomplish? Now, here's a little model that we've got. Right, the end goal in our transformation, in our response to the new normal, is, for example, to be seen as the world's most environmentally advanced corporation. This is a made-up story, but as you can see, how will they know that any change is an improvement? How will they know that they've moved to this world's most environmentally advanced corporation? Without measures, without data, and without correct analysis, the steering team are operating blind, and they're simply operating to opinion. So those two questions are vitally important for the steering team to know. It's also vitally important for the steering team to know what the response is going to be. So one of the responses from a sponsor and the project team is to increase the volume of sales of environmentally protective substances or products that to 30% of total sales. So how will they know that that's occurred? They need to be able to measure that. How will they know that any change is an improvement there? So it's vitally important that the leaders and the steering team have the correct measures, and they know that the actions they are taking are having the desired impact. In a short while, the Q&A will start. So if you would start to document any questions you've got. I can go back over any stages of the presentation if anything is not entirely clear. I'll be perfectly happy to do that. So please ask any questions you like. The Q&A is open. That's accessed through the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom. So you can pick there, ask any questions. So let's now get to something else, the meeting. So when these steering teams are having these meetings, what is it they're going to be doing? What is it? They've got the data, they've got the understanding. They've identified what it is they think they need to do. They understand the world in which the system operates, and they've hopefully generated some theories by which they can improve that system. So the areas for the team to focus on will be by sponsoring projects that will be improving the system. Now, this is a very simple model. There are others. This is a simple model of the phases of any improvement project: the initiation, the planning, the execution control, and the close of the project. If you want to get more information on that, go to the sponsors webinar that we covered last week. You can get that off our website. You can draw that down. We then discussed that the project team and the sponsor have a series of activities. The steering team must allow that project team to get on and do that. Give them the freedom, the 360 degrees of freedom they need to operate and deliver what that project's going to be. So are they going to stand by and just watch and wait, or are they going to do something? Well, so here's some clues as to what the steering team can be doing when they are operating in the initiation phase. First of all, it is the absolute role of the steering team and nobody else's to define the priority. It is the steering team that have to be absolutely clear on question 1, what is it we're trying to accomplish? And question 2, how will we know that any change is an improvement? They need to make sure that any project they sanction is aligned to the strategic objectives. You've got the destination you want to head in. Will this project help us get to that destination? One of the key roles they need to have, though, in the initiation phase is the prevention of initiative overload. Your organizations have a finite ability to be able to respond to change. And one of the things I would say to all leaders is this, is that you can think of every changes you like, but the people who have to carry out those changes are all in the same place, the workplace. And they have a definitive ability to be able to change. It is very limited, it's finite. In the planning phase, they must really help evaluate any potential plans. Are the plans that the project teams are carrying out, are they realistic? Is it achievable? And they must agree the charter with the team. That's the key roles in the planning phase. Now, in the monitoring phase, they need to monitor the progress of the project, support the sponsor, because the sponsor will need support, removing barriers, making sure that they are aligned to the strategic objectives, allowing them to have the correct resources. So the steering team will have a fundamental role in doing that. Throughout the project, they will need to ensure alignment with other initiatives to make sure that there's no counterproductive activity, that there's no sub-optimization of the activities that are going on. And really importantly is to listen to the teams frequently. Listen to what the teams are saying, because it is through what they're saying you will be able to develop new theories, new insights that may help you lead the transformation even easier. Then finally, at the end or of the close of the project, validate that the project delivered what we set out to do. That project was there to change the way that we work, change the way that we do things, change the way that we think. Ensure that that has been standardized into the day-to-day. And if it's at all possible, ensure replication across other areas. and one of the key things for a steering team to do is congratulate the team. It is the team that have delivered, and they deserve congratulations. Something else for the steering team to focus on. So we've got the executive steering team. One of the key things is going to be there'll be multiple projects all running at the same time. We need to ensure that there is alignment of those projects, that they're not competing for resource, that they're not tripping over each other, or that one project is changing part of the system that another project relies upon. So we need to ensure that the many competing projects each could help make the business better, but the steering team must determine the priority of the projects. Which ones should we do first? The alignment of the projects. Are these projects aligned with the strategy that we're leading? Are they sufficient? Will these projects, will they get us to a place where our system can operate in the new norm in an efficient, effective, and a flexible way? And then the final question is, are they actually necessary? Are they necessary? It's quite a daunting task for a steering team. They are using facts to identify where the system can be improved, where it needs to change in order to respond to the new normal. And it's a lot of conflicting worlds out there. So the agenda for the actual steering team itself will be looking something like this. We'd overview the program. How well is the overall program going? Have a quick review of the work stream activities and the impact it's having. Is it having the desired impact? Is it predicting the changes that we think we need? It's a great idea in the steering team to get what we refer to as spotlight presentations. This is where teams come in and present their project status, their learning, their actions, their fears, their concerns, anything that is related to the team that are transforming that process or that element of your system for the new future. We will then review the risk register, have a decision log, a communication plan. How will the rest of the organization know and learn about what it is we're doing in this new normal? What are the lessons learned? We've been running projects. What have we learned from doing the projects? The action log. What are the things that other people in the organization need to do? What are the things we as a steering team need to do? And then at the end of the meeting, the plus delta and feedback and review process. We'll review the actions, who the owners are, and generate next steps. That's a very simple steering team review meeting. We can close the meeting happily and then have any other business if necessary. So remember the Q&A. Please populate it if you wish. I'm going to summarize the last 40 odd minutes by saying this. Remember, the new normal has had a major impact on your business as a system. The world we live in today is very different from that we experienced 6 months ago. The things that were the norm in the past are very likely to be different today. Will the business system be able to respond to that? And if not, who's going to change it? Who's going to guide that change? And that's where the role of the leadership team and the steering team is. And some of the questions that we have to ask are, how will you know what is different? Looking at the top right-hand corner of the graphic, how will you know that the world is different outside? How will you have studied the data? How will you have analyzed the data? How will you have developed theories about what we need to do that's different? And then for the steering team, it's critical that they establish what path they will choose to follow the response to the difference we've seen from the first question. And the final role for the actual steering team is that they are there to navigate this path to ensure that your organization can respond to the new normal in a coherent and a proactive manner. Remember the role of the steering team. They are a group of senior leaders who have been designated the responsibility and the authority to change that business system so that it can better serve the customers both now and in the future in order to ensure sustainability for your organization. The 4 rules. The steering team must understand how the business works, have a clear strategy to respond to the world in which that system operates, and that world will be very different in the new normal. They must understand the scientific methods that allow them to develop and challenge theories. Having an opinion is no longer good enough. The role of the steering team is to ensure that they are steering using facts. It's imperative that the organisation has a system of improvement that will give the steering team the ability to prioritise and to control any and all of the improvement initiatives. All actions must be subject to rigorous and routine analysis of their impact. And a final look at the key messages. The steering team must continually observe the world in which your system operates, as it will be continually changing. As you stop today and look at how the world will be for the new normal, in 3 months' time, it will be different again. So the steering team must have mechanisms by which they can continually observe the changing world. They need the model of PDSA so that they can truly understand the data, develop theories and challenge those theories. But PDSA is a model that should be used at all levels of the business to challenge and develop theories about how we are going to respond to the current norm. It is particularly critical for the steering team, as they will be directing the use and the consumption of valuable and very limited resource. When we all return to work in 12 weeks' time, when we're all back and some of the restrictions are released, that resource may be even scarcer than it was before. We need to make sure we've optimized its use. The steering team has the responsibility to do that. We need to remind everybody in the steering team that whilst they may have some very, very strong opinions, those opinions are nowhere close to fact. They may see things, but that perspective is not fact. We can only get close to the facts by correctly analyzing the data and challenging the theories that we emerge from our understanding of that data. Finally, it is a key role of the steering team to ensure that they are steering using those facts. That's it. You've been very quiet throughout the presentation. I hope that's emerged and put some light into areas that you may not have considered. I'm going to ask Suze now if she's got any other questions from the question and answer box. Suze?
That was great, really interesting, and really appreciate your perspective on how the steering team should be operating. I don't have any questions for you.
How very disappointing. There we go. That was obviously very clear, all very boring.
I think that is a sign of just how clear you were. So I think that on that note, I'd like to say a big thank you for everyone for joining us today. The recording will be sent out to you after the weekend. We also, as Des mentioned, we load everything onto our Knowledge Hub on our website. So you can also always direct any of your colleagues there if they're interested in listening to any of our back catalogue of webinar recordings. If you have any questions, get in touch. Hopefully you know how to reach us. We're always available. We love to chat. We love questions. So do feel free just to get in touch with us anytime. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you again, Des. Have a very good and a very safe weekend, everybody.
Thank you very much, Suze. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Yes, indeed.
Thank you.